Welcome everyone to Cache County Planning Commission. This is our October 6th meeting. Glad you're here. And we begin our meetings with opening remarks. And tonight Brady has agreed to provide those. Take it away.
I'm going to give my opening remarks tonight in the form of a prayer, and then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. Our Father in heaven, we thank you this night for the opportunity that we have to gather as planning and zoning, and we're thankful for those that have come to participate in this meeting tonight. We're grateful for the freedoms which we enjoy living in this country and nation which we live. We're thankful for this county, thankful for the opportunities that provides us here and the beauty that we enjoy. We thank you once again for all that thou hast blessed us with. We say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Please stand and join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Brady. Okay, so we have our agenda. I'm aware of one slight modification to the agenda. Commissioners, staff has requested that we switch items 7 and 8. Is that correct, Tim?
Yes.
So any concerns with that?
Just the order. We switched the order.
Yes. So that means we would review the County Comprehensive General Plan update, draft future land use map first as our first regular action item, and then the TYJ storage rezone.
Is that any issue as far as time, posted time, where we're moving that up?
We should switch the times with those then.
Unfortunately, notices went out with those times.
Yeah, the notice went there, so that would be my only concern on that, is that we notice it one way. Whether we'd have an issue with that noticing.
Mr. Chairman, who was the request by staff?
Staff, yeah.
From what I observed on that TYJ rezone, do you think it'll take that long?
I don't.
And the times are posted to just help the public know that it won't be heard before that time.
Yeah, and
So in case they were planning to schedule around the public hearings.
so I think the consequence would be that we would be discussing a change to the future land use map a little earlier than planned. Although by the time we get through staff report, it could be pretty
We
darn
might
close
be,
to
we
that
might
time.
be close. And if we have anything on the consent agenda, if we have to bring anything out of there as well, so. So that's my only concern. I definitely, support the change, but
Okay,
with that concern noted.
let's just drag it out till
All right.
5. So if commissioners are comfortable, we'll go ahead and adopt the agenda as amended without objection. Okay? All right, next item is review and approval of the minutes from September 1st meeting. Commissioners had a chance to take a look at those. Any issues, concerns? We want to change? Okay, if none, without objection, we'll adopt the minutes from our September 1st meeting. Okay, so the next items on our agenda are consent items, items 1 through 5. And for those here in the audience who may be interested on any one of those, that's item number 1, the Butcher Shop CUP, which is requesting a 6-month extension. The Carlson Soccer CUP, which is also requesting a 6-month extension. Birch Hollow Subdivision, First Amendment, requesting 6-month extension. Tom Pitcher Lot Split Subdivision, Second Amendment, 6-month extension. and the Mount Naomi subdivision Second Amendment, which all 5 of these items comply with county standards, ordinances, and guidelines. And so unless there's someone in the audience that needs to or would like to speak in objection to or have questions on any of these 5 items, we will approve them all at the same time. So is anyone here interested in having any questions or comments on any of the first 5 items? Okay, seeing none, commissioners, entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to make one comment
Yep.
on consent item 2, the Carlson Soccer CUP.
Yes.
I was out there the other day and just amazed how professional that looks and what a good job you guys have done on that.
Okay.
Really looks good.
Can I ask a question? I thought I was on the agenda tonight. How do I do that?
For the Carlson, we're gonna approve the request unless you would like us not to.
No, I want to approve the
Okay.
request, but I want to be on the agenda. I got an item I'd like to just cover with the county council.
On
I thought I
the,
was on the agenda, but I'm not. So how do I do it? I don't know the procedure of getting on regular action items.
Is it specific to the CUP?
okay, and the way you get on the agenda would be to speak with staff, and it would have to be an issue to bring to our attention. But this being the planning commission, is that what you mean? You said county council, so I just wanted to make sure. Okay. Did you just have a question, or did you need to change something?
Yeah, what I did was according to the council's suggestions, I put up a 6-foot chain link fence.
Yes, sir.
Along 4200 North.
Yes, sir.
And to me, it's perfect as far as the cars not parked on the road and not letting any balls go across the road.
Yeah.
Keeping the kids from going across the road. But it's only 7 feet off of the road. It has to be 14 unless the speed limit is for the same as on Second West. It's 55 in the county right there, so it has to be 14 feet off the road. And if you do that, then I can't water, and the kids ball us. In other words, the perfect idea is where it's at right now. I didn't do it, I'm trying to be rude or anything like that. I thought it was a perfect situation. But if we change the speed limit down to what it is on Second West and to 35, then I think my fence is in accordance with the, I need to get on there to discuss a change of mile per hour.
I can,
Go ahead.
yeah. So we've met with Mr. Carlson and his team, and that included Matt Phillips, county engineer or public works director. And there was an effort made to put a fence to address the condition of stopping the errant balls from going out into the right of way. However, I think there was a misunderstanding as to what steps needed to be taken to make sure that it was put in the right place and in accordance with road manual standards and engineering standards. And so that is being discussed now as one of several items to follow through and finalize the conditions and to get the conditional use permit recorded. I think there were just some misunderstandings, and so therefore an extension is needed to give you more time to complete all those conditions and work through all of the standards. And the commission, their responsibility is to make sure that approvals do comply with standards, and they rely on we as staff, including the engineering department, to comply with all of the county codes. So I think where there's some discussion that's underway as to whether that fence could stay or whether it needs to be removed and brought back closer to your or on your property line is where you're at with Public Works. And
Who has the authority to change the speed limit? Is it this board?
no, it's not the Planning Commission. Yep.
So it's worthless to come.
No, it's not worthless, but because we like to see you, and
Well, you've got a good face too. I just as soon not waste your my time.
no, that makes sense. But it sounds like you're working through some stuff with staff. That's the reason for the extension. And so we're gonna give you time and staff time to work through And if there needs to be any changes, it'll come back before us. And we'll deal with it at that time. But hopefully, you guys with staff can work through any of the issues, and whether it's changing the speed limit or moving the fence, you know, it can get worked out. So,
And I do recall Matt Phillips sharing that the classification of the road and its current levels of traffic and the future anticipated growth of traffic might suggest that it remain at its presently posted speed, but it would be under his purview and his department's recommendation to explore any posted speed change, and could further continue that discussion with him.
How do I do that? You?
That would be another follow-up staff meeting. Yep, you bet.
yeah, thank you. Okay, any other questions, commissioners? On that?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we approve the 5 consent items as presented.
Okay.
I second the motion.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Item number 6 was removed from the agenda, and because of an incomplete application. So we'll move on to the new item 7, which is a public hearing that can begin in 5 minutes after we hear from staff on the comprehensive general plan update, the draft future land use map. So take it away, Tim.
Thank you. Just need one more moment to connect up. All right, thanks for your patience. So I'll provide a little bit of background regarding the additional review of the Cache County Comprehensive General Plan Update, specifically the draft future land use map. When I say draft, because it's still in a state of an advanced draft, a final draft, where modifications, refinements could still be made. The county council did review this item in terms of the general plan and the future land use map, as well as the regional collaboration plan, and they were given a preliminary review of the urban and rural assessment and cost of services plan that we'll be reviewing later this evening. That hearing was held on September 13th. No action was taken that evening to potentially adopt the general plan as well as the regional collaboration plan. And staff's understanding is that the council would like to see all 3 elements brought together at the same time. So given that time frame, we thought it'd be helpful and most transparent and good for public process to bring a potential future land use map refinement to you. And this is just the picture above is the current draft future land use map. What you see is the hatched areas would be potential annexation areas of the communities. And you note that some of the hatched area shows a specific color, such as this would be a Logan future annexation area, and it shows a light industrial color blue. This red outlined area is the only area in the county unincorporated area that does not lie within a declared annexation area that has been identified as potential future industrial. And it's about a 51-acre area. And given some recent, I would say, over the past 6 months or more, some comments from property owner and potential inquiries for potential rezone of industrial use, staff thought it would be worth the time to conduct some additional analysis around the airport, and that's what you're looking at here. As you see the context surrounding the airport with Hyde Park's existing zoned areas, which is area G as commercial, area F, and areas F as industrial areas. And then you see Hyde Park, future annexation area extending west to the airport as well as beyond the airport. Only the area E has been identified as future industrial use, whereas the area west of the airport for Hyde Park is not identified as a use per se. Whereas Smithfield City shows area D in their future land use planning as a future annexation area for light industrial. And then area H would be Logan City future annexation area, also as light industrial. And it points to a land use pattern where there could be potential contiguous industrial use surrounding the airport, so as to not have a patchwork of industrial between, residential between industrial areas. And that's somewhat illustrated here, that if the future land use map of the county general plan included this continuous ring, if you will, around the airport, a potential industrial area, that could make sense in terms of land use compatibility, intensity of land use, the potential for larger trucks and freight movement between these areas, and not disrupting residential areas in between. And these do relate to some of the intensive conditions of the airport and reflected here in the airport overlay zoning. And just by way of reference, this tan pointed feature is a high-intensity noise zone area, and it relates to the direct arrival of aircraft onto the airport runway. And then also you see the inner approach zone, which is this blue hatched area. That's the most direct airport aircraft approaching the airport in the most direct sense, but there's the approach zone, and then there are height regulations for any potential development reflected here with these rings of color. And you see a limitation of 10 feet right around the runway, and then as you go further out, 20, 30, 40 feet. But there are properties in this vicinity that have navigation easements where the uses are restricted, or for any proposed development in some areas, there's a recommendation to allow it, especially in this inner approach zone and the 65 LDN zone. Recommendation for no residential, no public gathering spaces such as schools, and no retail, but could support industrial. And then some of these other areas, such as these regulating zones, there's at least a recommendation that any development approval should note that this is in an airport impact area, and that there would be the sounds and the intensity associated with the airport. So with that in mind, the potential recommendation for you to consider recommending to the council is a refinement of the current draft future land use map as shown on left to reflect what is shown as potential modifications on the right, and that would be the addition of area E, and then to more clearly reflect area A as the actual airport area and the industrial uses associated with that. So that's the report, and I'm happy to respond to questions or further discussion.
Questions for staff, commissioners?
Since, and you might have touched on this, but since the plans come together, the general plan has come together, what instigated this change at this point in time?
There have been discussions with prospective industrial development north of the airport for several months, and those discussions should have been reflected in this general plan as feedback, commentary in terms of how growth around the airport should occur. And it was not recognized until last month that the map did not reflect that specific area. And then it prompted this more detailed analysis and led to what you see today. So it's analysis that
better late than never, but seems to reflect a reasonable and contiguous land use pattern that's compatible with the airport and surrounding area, accommodate the growth of jobs and industry for that type of use.
I think that's great analysis, and it seems to match with my vision of that area as well. One thing that, and just to muddy the water even a little bit more, one thing that has been weighing on my mind a lot lately is just a transportation corridor through there. And I know that's not necessarily something that we touched on or built into that, but that's, as this valley makes these massive growth spurts, my concern is how are we going to get people through the valley? Valley View is going to be updated, but a north-south corridor just is not necessarily part of this plan, and it, probably would have deserved a little more discussion as we went through that. But I just wanted to bring that up. I don't know what the tool is that we put into place there, but this section, or at least to the west of what we've talked about here, seems to be the area where that could happen.
It's a very important issue, and there are two other efforts that do relate to the general plan or complement, if not supplement it. And one would be the CMPO, the Regional Transportation Plan, and a further west bypass, if you will, or corridor to take pressure off of 91 is in the very early stages of at least being contemplated, and further studies are anticipated. There's also somewhat on pause a transportation plan element, which our Public Works Department is going to continue. And I think that their preference was to see this land use general plan somewhat finalized, and then continue and resume the transportation plan that can consider the proposed land uses and refine that transportation plan, and then prioritize the projects in terms of the timing and the funding to address those challenges.
I guess my point is chicken or the egg first. Where do we go, and how do we support the efforts back and forth? If there's a plan for a transportation corridor, our planning should probably reflect that. Point being, a transportation corridor may fit perfectly with an industrial use area, or it may not. And anyway, that's my point: is are we congruent in our plans? So we built, and I don't know who gets the first go at it. If it's this, or if it's the plan, if it's the CMPO, or
Some good thinking there, and from what I understand of the west corridor is that if there is less land use tied to it, then it could remain more free-flowing. That's at least some early preliminary discussion I've heard of its potential. But certainly as that corridor is further studied and better understood, and then if there are land use opportunities that are recognized, then there's always an amendment to the general plan as a future land use map process that we explore. But I appreciate your awareness of the tie between land use and transportation.
yeah, I didn't have a specific proposal or anything. It just.
I just don't think we can kick it down the road another 10, 15 years.
Certainly not.
And
But
Revising the plan.
that's what's been wearing on me.
From a planning perspective, you'd like to know what the future land uses are going to be in order to plan the transportation network that meets those needs. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions for Tim?
One other just quick question. That land around the airport that we've identified as potential, whether it be Hyde Park, Smithfield, Logan, that's all still private land, correct?
There may be some airport authority ownership. We don't have that identified on the map, but mostly so, mostly private land.
The only reason I ask that is, I don't know, it's been kind of interesting to observe where future annexation plans of one city touches to another, kind of seems like when that dam breaks, it's a race to who can get what and what's best for the landholder at the time, which is good, but just kind of creates some problems versus if it was planned or if they even annexed it now. But I recognize that's got to be done by when the property holders are ready.
You know, and it's a great issue, well, it's an important issue and a great topic for ongoing regional collaboration, to have an understanding of how to grow together and how to do so in a thoughtful and coordinated way. So, coordinated land use planning and transportation planning.
Thanks, Brady. Any other comments or questions? Done for now, Tim? Okay, so now would be a good time for a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Anyone want to second it?
I'll say.
We've got a motion, a second, to open the public hearing on the general plan update draft future land use map. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, is there anyone here who would like to make comment on this particular item? Seeing none?
I move that we close the public hearing on the Cache County Comprehensive General Plan update. I'd second that.
We got a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Tim, staff is looking for action tonight from us to
Yes.
sort of recommend approval to county council for this revision.
Correct.
Okay. Any concerns or questions from commissioners? Doesn't look like it, so.
I just think it'd be good to add somewhere in the notes the comments that Jason and Brandon brought up about the corridor,
Yeah, the transportation.
because that's extremely important for our county.
Okay, and that perhaps a note that these land uses could be updated and refined as transportation corridors and planning become further detailed. Something along those lines as an update and clarification of the text. Okay,
Sounds
so that could be the future land use map or within the actual text of the plan as it relates to describing this map. And so if you felt that we could find the right places to insert that language, there's possibly more than just the future land use map to have that narrative.
I think, if I understand Brady, just bringing it to the attention of the council, our concerns, sharing our concerns with the council and the need to move that process along and encourage that happen.
And some potential text to describe that issue.
Yeah.
Look, this is a baby step to what needs to be done. I mean, there's a lot that needs to go beyond, there's a lot more communication that needs to take place with the council, I think, this is just like a baby step, Band-Aid, I think, to get us to that next step. Is that what we're looking at? I hope. Because there's a lot that needs to be done, so.
Yeah, agreed. Tim, if I could just ask a question on there of what your vision of the tool would be that you would use. Let's, we throw that out there. The commission believes that this area is potentially critical for this type of a use. Would that be simply within the current zones, or would it be an overlay zone, or what kind of tool would you envision could be reflected in our plan to direct us that way?
I'm picturing two tools based on your good discussion. One is just in the general plan itself to state that this area, that this is current contemplated land use pattern that seems to make sense. However, it could be modified and updated as transportation plan might more clearly identify how this could respond to future transportation roads and networks.
Okay.
So the tool of the general plan could be add some more clarity there and invite focus on this area and other areas. And then secondly, when property owners seek a rezone for an industrial type of use, this would be similar to growth within these potential annexation areas throughout the county. That is that we encourage the property owners to consult with the city. And just as we've seen others do, and that's to find out the city's support or concern of what's occurring in the county and whether they would intend to annex and service such property. And so that coordination would be an important collaborative tool. And then to potentially support a rezone from agriculture to industrial in the county in an appropriate area following that communication with those municipalities. And continue to explore how it could be done most compatibly. County first, or city second. In many cases, cities just aren't ready to do years out before they're ready to annex and service.
So I guess my point would be on this subject. We see the future annexation plans. Hyde Park has plans to go way west there. I'm looking at a placeholder, basically, for the county to say, here's where we think this corridor will end up. It may be a couple miles wide, but somewhere in here, there may be a transportation corridor. Would you be comfortable with adding your first tool that you talked about in there? Just a general statement in there. As it's written here, if we added just a paragraph or a sentence reflecting what you said.
Absolutely, and I hear that as a similar support for what Brady just mentioned. There's some mention and encouragement of considering the transportation, how transportation evolves in this area, that it could encourage change and modification of the land use.
There's not many options, are
Any
there?
northwest corridor is gonna be west of that because of the airport.
Because of the airport.
Yeah.
It's gonna be somewhere between 1,200 and 2,400 west.
Absolutely.
Which will be
And I
right
think,
here.
and I think most of us understand that, but development can definitely change those plans and it could happen quickly with an annexation. Hyde Park beside, there's a landowner that has a big parcel that goes way west and impacts all of that. That could happen quickly. So I would be more comfortable with some sort of a statement in there, as Brady said. If we could put that in there and just reflect that, and nudge the council that we need to be looking forward to that in our zoning as well as all of the other planning organizations that are doing the same type
I
of work.
see, and so as to not frustrate future corridor planning with
Correct.
land use that's not put into the right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All that being said, I don't know what the language is that we want to use.
I think you could state with, if you were to recommend approval to council for the refinements for the future land use map as shown and
Inclusion of statement about future corridor.
modification of plan to include statements of corridor planning and how the land use relates.
Definitely support that.
Makes sense.
I'd second that.
That's a motion, there you go.
Okay. we have a
Recommend
motion.
the county council approval of the Cache County Comprehensive General Plan update draft future land use map with including a statement on support of planning for transportation corridors through this area. Still second that.
Yeah. Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you, Tim. Thank you for letting Mr. Olson know that we had already passed his item and he didn't need to sit here any longer. I was gonna do the same, but you beat me to it, so thank you. Okay, so now we're up to the amended item number 7, TYJ storage rezone.
Thank you. So this is regarding a specific piece of property proposed for rezone from A10 agriculture to the I industrial zone. The 3 parcels combined to just over 26 acres. You see the vicinity of those, really don't see the outline of the airport, but it is just north of the airport, and you see the 3 parcels adjacent to each other, side by side, as well as parcel 4, which is just north of parcel 13. And so the intent is to develop the properties for self-service storage and RV storage and allowed uses in the industrial zone. This is similar to what you just reviewed in the potential general plan, future land use plan update, except you see the actual combination of the parcels outlined in yellow with the star symbol. And also what you see is the future annexation areas of Hyde Park, Smithville, Logan, and you see this kind of purple color as the Smithville's future planned light industrial area. And then you see Hyde Park's existing commercial and industrial or light industrial areas. And then this yellow dashed outline is where the draft general plan had anticipated light industrial. So with that context, let's look a little closer at the actual airport overlay zones. And you see the property is impacted by, directly impacted by the high intensity 65 LDN zone. And there are, as well as the inner approach zone, it's the blue hatched area, and then just right next to it. And so these are areas where there are in fact avigation easements. Highlight here of where those avigation easements limit certain types of development on a portion of one parcel and entirely on parcel 14. And the avigation easement states that requires compliance with RPZ airport overlay zoning and limits incompatible land uses, including residences, places of public assembly, such as churches, schools, hospitals, office buildings, shopping centers, and other uses with similar concentrations of persons. Also, fuel storage facilities are also prohibited, but the less dense industrial development is not prohibited, it's supported by these easements. And this references the current draft future land use map, the potential for an update to that map, future land use map, and then the context of this property to the north of the airport and that continuous potential ring of planned industrial surrounding the airport as it relates to that central use as well as the noise and flight safety impacts that radiate from that use. Public Works has identified that 4200 North provides access to the property and that the road surface is in fair condition and that there's some potential improvements to be made to that road. And as there's no posted speed limit, it does default to 55 miles per hour. And so there's potential for good access and some potential for need to improve some of the conditions of that public road. And there are really no comments from fire or Logan Environmental or the GIS department, no fire application easements. So given the land use limitations for residential and commercial development, with moderate to higher levels of person concentration, staff's finding is that industrial zone uses would be potentially more compatible near the Lone Cache Airport at this property location. Here are some potential recommendations for you to consider in terms of recommendation to council. That concludes my report.
Thanks, Tim. Any questions for staff or commissioners?
And I know this is far distant, but as we look at US 91 off of 4200, that's, I mean, the road I believe is adequate and listen to our public works on that, but my concern would be access off of 91 up there. That is definitely less than optimal access there. It's
The other benefit
pretty dangerous
is
intersection.
Second West goes over to the Maverick light, Hyde Park light.
Correct,
So that would be the only
yeah.
saving grace there, that they would hopefully follow that path.
And the other thing would just be a comment, you know, as we look at preserving open space, we know what's happening there, but this is one area that we still have, open space there, and this is a step to filling in that gap that we have there, so that would be my point.
Commissioners, other thoughts? Okay, I think at this point, we can open the public hearing if there aren't any more questions for staff.
I'll make that motion. Open the public hearing.
A second.
So a motion to second to open the public hearing on the TYJ storage rezone. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the applicant here tonight. Come on up, Tony, please. State your name for us, please.
Hello.
Go ahead and state your name for the record.
Tony Johnson, from Logan. So we looked at the parcel, we trying to find a place where, I don't know the specifics of what we're proposing is what you want to hear, but at least where it's originated from is, you know, we feel that there's a need for a larger storage unit type space, RVs, boats, that kind of a thing, and there's plenty of storage unit places around the valley, but we felt where this was located in the area that it's in, there's restrictions with proximity to the airport, which we're aware of, height limitations and other things, and so the proposed use seems to fit well there. It's, you know, probably as low impact as you can find, I believe, and you know, as you drive through the various communities that are growing, people with boats and RVs and toys parked side of the houses, I think the preference would be to try to find a home for them and try to get them off the street. So that's kind of where we're working from.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Okay, thanks very much. Is there anyone here that'd like to make a comment on this particular item? Come on up. Please state your name for us.
Yeah, Marv Neff is my name. And I actually have a question and some comments, but we have found out over the last 10 years that when applying to get storage units out in that area, that the county has required that the road be built clear from zero or the highway all the way out. So are they gonna make them redo the road for that mile, which is a couple $1 million bucks? I mean, what is happening? Has the county lifted that requirement, or is it still in place?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our Public Works Director is not here tonight to answer that question for us, but our understanding is that there's a new method for development to contribute their fair share of a road upgrade, a payment in lieu, until such time as the county has all the pieces in place, including funding to do the upgrades to the full length of the road. And so I don't know if that's the full or correct answer, but that's what we've noticed in some items similar to this that have come through lately. And, but our Public Works Director would be able to speak more specifically about how that would work and if the county has this particular road segment on their agenda for improvements. So Is that any different from what you understand, Tim?
Similar, I could add a little more comment.
Yeah, come on up.
So there was a concept review meeting, the early stages of this rezone inquiry, and we had our fire marshal, public works director, planning, zoning, and others. And so the standards for development were shared with the applicant, just to say at the time, if this does get rezoned and you pursue development application, then these standards would apply. The actual text, this comment written from Public Works Director, just informs of the current condition and potential improvements to the road. The Public Works Director will determine whether it's just the frontage of the property or if additional length beyond the property is required. Most typically, and I'm not speaking specific to this project, but most typically the full road improvement to a departure point or an intersection point is if a new service is being pulled. But if the public road is already serving properties beyond proposed development, then it's typically just the frontage of that property that's required for improvement.
Yeah.
The setback could be increased given that this is classified as a major collector. So there might need to be a deeper setback such that when road improvements by the county are applied at some point in the future, then it meets the standard for the setback.
So Mr. Neff, just to add to that, at this stage of the process too, this being just the rezone, there's not, those requirements are not necessary at this time, but when they come before us for CUP or subdivision approval, at that time is when improvements to the road would be imposed on the project.
Okay, just another comment, just to make sure. I've looked at these properties on that, about where you, and for the last 10 years, have been told that we have to pave that whole road all the way out. I am now a partner in the storage units just the next road over on 1,000, and we're 400 instead of 800, so just the next road over. And we have applied for the next, we have a lot of acres there, and we have some units and some RV parking in place. We've applied every couple of years for 10 years and been told that we had to pave 1,000 all the way out. And then just a year and a half ago, our neighbor applied and put in that Kemp farm or that marijuana farm or whatever next door there. And he didn't have to do anything. And my point was the amount of workers and everything he had. We were told by the county, because we have increased traffic, we couldn't add on the other 10 buildings. And when he built that facility, I mean, he got a dozen workers that come out every day. I mean, in a month, he has 100 trips out there, and we might have 2. So I'm just wondering, I mean, we will reapply to do our addition there. Maybe we've been receiving bad information, but we have been waiting for that restriction to be lifted. On both of those roads is where we're at, so.
All right, so you further east?
North.
North.
We are one road north
Okay.
and 4 blocks east, so we're closer
Yeah.
to that area, so, and have been there. So I guess we can apply now and.
I think it's worth scheduling a meeting and just having a conversation with engineering. And each road is analyzed separately and in context of the network.
Situation is.
I think it should be noted too that the road plan did change. How long ago was it that it did change?
The road manual was, a new updated manual was adopted in January of 2021. So it's just coming up on 2 years, just almost 2 years adopted.
In addition to that, we're adopting a new general plan this year, and so that makes that definitely can change our overall picture as well. But I think what Tim said is right, each individual situation. So 4200 maybe, you know, it's a, what's the terminology, the type of road?
Major collector.
Major collector, would be handled differently than another road that may be a block away, based on the type of surface that it has, the width and all of those things. And so, so each one is looked at individually.
So who do we talk to specifically this time around?
You would call our office, Planning and Zoning Office, and schedule a concept review.
Okay.
And we'll make sure the staff that you need to hear feedback from are in that meeting.
Mr. Neff, did you get a rezone on your project?
Yes,
Okay, and so, but it wouldn't have been until you came in for a conditional use permit that the road restrictions or the road requirements would have come into play,
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
our plan was for the whole site,
Right,
and we ended up putting in 2 buildings
Yeah.
instead of all the others.
Yeah.
Which was kind of a slap.
yeah. Mr. Johnson may run into the same issues that you did, or maybe things have changed and they're looked at differently, but I have similar concerns about what's going to be required for the road upgrades, and if it crosses the threshold of value that you run into as well with the number of buildings and that sort of thing. So I know there's a threshold in law that says if you're above $1 million or something to that effect, then it has to be annexed. You have to be annexed or something to that effect. So,
Yeah, I think we had discussions on that, we're fine with whatever's happening there.
yeah.
But that would be certainly different with the,
And you probably, as you have discussions with staff, you may want to look at which zone it is in, whether you had a rezone or not, because previously, these type of storage units were allowed in the A10 zone.
He's in commercial.
And is he commercial now? We did check that. Okay. Yep.
okay,
And so those have changed over the last several years, what is allowed in each individual zone.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Anyone else like to comment on this item? Commissioners, would you like to close the public hearing?
So moved. I'll second.
Motion is second to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Spackman made that motion, correct?
Thank you. Okay, commissioners, what would you like to do?
I think Jason brought up a relevant comment regarding open space, and currently that area is open. Again, though, at the same time, the location of the property is such that in that fly zone that it would make a good location for this, so it's kind of a catch-22 in my mind, but I'd be interested in hearing what everybody else has to say.
My opinion on the open space is it's something that's needed, but if you look at this area and the 2 cities, well, really 3 cities, and the airport that's already there, and somewhere just west of this that you're gonna have a new transportation corridor going through, that's gonna really, you're gonna surround this area by something. If I were sitting on a panel to approve open space applications, so somewhere like this with all the cities looking at that as industrial, commercial type ground, doesn't seem like the smartest place to try to have open space preserved long term. You know, it's not in a corridor coming into a city or into the valley from any of our 4 directions. It's in the middle of cities that are growing pretty rapidly, and they all plan on that for growth, future growth. In this particular piece, I don't see the open space being a big issue there. And it is limited for what can go there because of the airport.
And I will admit, that comment the comment I made was more out of sadness than reality. We've had a discussion on this area and what the future will be, but I just point that out as we have a push for open space. This is the first step in closing up that area to, you know, from Smithfield to North Logan. This is the only open area there, really, and so it's more just to point that out. I get the writing on the wall in this area, and we had the discussion tonight on what do we want to do around the airport, and that seems to be the consensus with the municipalities as well as staff here. This is where light industrial is going.
One other thing too, it'll be interesting to see is even if we do pass it tonight to the rezone, the possibility of it happening, I think of the storage units that we saw up in Richmond, or some of the requirements for water from the fire department, being in an undeveloped area, some of this is gonna maybe be unrealistic at this point in time, but.
And if there are road improvements.
Yeah, but regardless, I do agree with you guys on, this is a good area for what we're talking.
I think the infrastructure will be tough to get up there though, but yeah, it's a great spot for it, so.
Okay. Other thoughts, commissioners?
And just to point that this area is impaired by the airport as well. What do you do with the area right downstream from the runway? So reluctantly.
Or keep it as farm ground, but
Yeah.
it's a tough location.
Just out of curiosity, Mr. Johnson, have you pursued this any further as far as checking with the fire on what they would require for? So, I don't know if it's something that, I mean, if we approved it, it don't really matter, it's how it goes.
I might just add that I haven't showed the entire draft future land use map of the general plan. This is the only area for planned expanded industrial growth, from the council's perspective.
Good point. Before somebody makes a motion on this, Tim, what other uses, so when we do a rezone, we allow multiple things to occur in that zone. What other potential uses can go into an industrial area?
Storage, warehousing, industrial uses, they can range from heavier to lighter, indoor manufacturing, some outdoor manufacturing.
If my memory serves me right, this is the one area that we allow sexually oriented businesses as well.
Could you pull that up, Angie?
Yeah.
So we can see it.
I always have to bring that point up because we may have a proposal for a storage unit, but when a zoning
Changes.
when zoning changes, that opens us up to a myriad of different uses. And normally we list those on the staff report, and so I just wanted to make sure I was clear.
So it would be general manufacturing, agricultural manufacturing, commercial kennel, animal shelter, storage and warehousing, self-storage facility, transport services, general vehicle repair, sexually oriented businesses, crematorium, utility facility for distribution, telecommunication facility, a new cell tower, private airports, concentrated animal feed operation of capital.
Was that livestock auction or, it wasn't it a livestock auction?
Livestock auction, oh yeah, I see that one. Yeah, livestock auction facility. Oh, that is instead of, thank you for pointing that out.
If we think about it though, the airport restrictions may prevent
For sure, because it's public gathering locations. I just have to point that out, as, before we take a vote on something like this. There can be some other potentially objectionable uses in this zone, and that's one of the risks that we took in putting storage units in industrial versus the commercial zone, is we take on some less palatable uses by changing this zone.
Good point.
Is there any comment from Smithfield City where it's in their future annexation?
There was coordination with the city, and they provided a letter
I
of
didn't s-
non-opposition, and they see that, at least the comment seems to indicate recognition of consistency of land use and their future growth.
I didn't see where they had replied, but yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
I'm noting in the 1724 chapter of sexually oriented businesses, the distances between the greater distance, 1,500 feet from school, public park, library, religious institution, viewpoint. Those are not as compatible in this area. But then 660 feet from any residential use or any agricultural or residential zone boundary, which seems to indicate the entire lot. So 660 feet, not just from the house, but from the lot. You start to get some buffers and distances there. 660 feet from a gateway corridor. Invites review of that chapter.
And in reality, I mean, what we discussed previously tonight is, I mean, we're looking at this entire area as light industrial, and I'm not saying that these things absolutely go there, but we're looking at changing the overall character of that whole area, and this is just the first one to really hit us. But the first one is also the green light that tells others, and we've already had one tonight, hey, we've applied and we would like to do some more stuff here. So I don't think this will be the last one that we see in short order for this area.
Along with what you were saying, that other one is in an A10 zone right now. It is an industrial.
Did you say?
It's commercial.
No, the land use is commercial, but the zoning is A10 still.
Oh, it is?
Yeah, so that's why Mr. Neff is a little different with,
That
the
was-
road issue would be the same, I think.
That was my recollection, was
Yeah.
that was
It
one
wasn't
of
a rezone.
one of the last ones that we did in the
It is.
A10.
I was wrong, apologize. Some primary ag did.
And so they were under a much different regimen at that time than what we see currently. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else, commissioners? Okay, if someone's inclined, they can make a motion.
Make a motion that, recommend approval of the rezone from A10 to industrial, to the approval of the general plan draft that we already did, so, yeah, I recommend this. Moving on for approval.
For the TYJ storage
TYJ
rezone.
storage rezone.
Okay. Do we have a second? Don't leave Nathan hanging. No one wants the second?
Well, I'll second it.
Okay, Brady. So we have a motion and a second to recommend approval to the county council, TYJ storage rezone. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
All right, thank you. That goes to the county council, and good luck with them. Okay. Next item on our agenda, item number 9, Mount Naomi Winery conditional use permit. Staff report for that.
Yes, so this CUP is a request to operate, request to operate a winery facility, which is use type 6160 on 49.4 acres in the agricultural zone. As you recall, winery is a new use type. We had one come through previously in September. So again, the winery facility request is to produce and sell premium wines from estate grapes supplemented by non-estate grown grapes as needed. The facility will have an initial production capacity of 5,000 cases with the capability to produce 15,000 with the addition of more tanks and processing equipment. And the use type does allow up to a maximum of 15 cases per calendar year to be produced as part of a winery facility. In addition to the processing and production of wine, the proposed use will also include public tours, tasting, and retail sales, as well as wine education seminars, workshops, and tastings. Per the letter of intent and included as attachment A with site plans and elevations, would be a new 3-story, nearly 9,000 square foot structure that will house the winery facilities and related uses. The first level will consist of wine production and support space. Second level will be for hospitality and administration space. The third level will be a mezzanine area. There will be a exterior deck and a crush area canopy also. The structure itself would be located about 300 feet north of the existing structure for the vineyards at Mount Naomi Agritourism Facility and approximately 1,400 feet from 1,000 East. The winery is accessed off 1,000 East via a existing private road, which was completed as a condition of approval for the agritourism facility. So the definition for the winery use type requires that the wine produced at the facility must be produced from 51% or more of products that have been grown within the legally defined boundaries of Cache County. Currently, the subject property has 10 acres of existing vineyard with 7 additional acres scheduled to be planted next year and an additional 9 acres in the following year, 2024. Their full development envisions 26.2 acres of vineyard, estate fruit that could support 5,500 cases of wine production. Also, additional on-site improvements include a new driveway off the private road to the winery structure, a paved parking area as well as a gravel parking area, underground power, sanitary wastewater leach field system, and a process wastewater treatment system. There will also be fire protection, water storage, utilities, grading and landscaping improvements. The applicant anticipates 3 full-time employees and 3 part-time employees during the non-harvest season and 6 full-time during harvest and bottling. Hours of operation are proposed from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Friday during non-harvest and 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Sunday during harvest season. Tasting room hours of operation will be from 10:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Sunday, and marketing events are between 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. And I didn't actually see anywhere in the application submittal items where marketing event was defined, so it is a condition of approval that we just get a better understanding of what that is. The subject property is legal and is designated as an agricultural remainder in the Mount Naomi subdivision, the First Amendment, which was accorded in 2018. However, an ag remainder is not eligible for development, so that item that we passed on the consent calendar for the subdivision amendment will create that buildable lot for this facility. So with conditional uses, we review them based on the standards and criteria that are defined and include compliance with law, health, safety, and welfare, adequate service provision, impacts, and mitigation. So again, the use type, winery, they are proposing to meet the full definition of that, which is lengthy, so I won't go over it in detail. But the proposed use, as described in the letter of intent with the conditions of approval, will meet the minimum standards for winery. As far as health, safety, and welfare, the primary activities as identified in the letter of intent are proposed to occur on that new Lot 3, and then also the ag remainder where the vineyards will be located of the subdivision, and will not cause unreasonable risk to the safety of persons or property, and does not unreasonably interfere with the lawful use of the surrounding properties. As far as adequate service provision, again, access to the properties is from 1,000 East, which is a county road. It's classified as a major collector, serving as the main corridor between Smithfield and Hyde Park. Provides access to local roads, ag lands, and a few residential parcels. The road is paved with an average width of 20 feet. For the proposed use, the road is required to meet a major local road standard, not the major collector standard, and is just considered substandard as to the width of the paved shoulders. The private road that comes off of 1000 East to the existing agritourism facility and UPIC operation will also provide access to the winery. It is approximately 22 feet wide, gravel, and in good condition, according to a site visit by the county engineer. The actual number of parking spaces that will be required will be determined as part of the condition that requires a parking analysis be done. Logan City states that a commercial dumpster will be provided for the use and has listed their minimum standards that would need to be complied with. Water is, in the letter of intent, it states water supply will be supplied by Hyde Park City, but I need, as a condition of approval, written confirmation from Hyde Park will be required, stating that they will supply the amount needed for the irrigation, commercial, and industrial processes, as well as fire suppression that are required as part of the proposed winery. But I've also included an alternative if the water is not being provided by Hyde Park. The applicant must provide confirmation and approvals from the State of Utah Water Rights Division that they have enough water rights and the correct use types to support the facility. The applicant must also work with the Utah Department of Environmental Quality, Division of Drinking Water, to establish a public drinking water system. You'll remember this came up as part of the RV campground. That a public water drinking system is defined as any drinking water, public or privately owned system, which serves 15 or more connections or 25 or more people at least 60 days out of the year. So if this is applicable, because they're not using the Hyde Park water, they will need written confirmation that they have an approved public water system for this facility as well. And those will all need to be confirmed prior to recording the permits. Septic, the applicant has provided a wastewater feasibility study for the treatment and disposal of the wastewater produced as part of the site. So that has been reviewed by Bear River Health Department, and they confirmed, that it is feasible on the subject property based on that study. Again, fire will require the applicant to install an on-site water supply for fire protection. And they'll just need to meet with fire department to go through a full plan review for that prior to issuance of the zoning clearance. Known or reasonably anticipated detrimental effects of the use, noxious odors, noise, traffic. Again, given the location, which is kind of removed from a lot of residential areas, with the conditions in place, I don't anticipate that those will be an issue. Public notice was posted and sent out. And I received no comments. So again, I have the conditions listed, 14 of them. Some are required prior to recording the permit, some before operation or issuance of a zoning clearance. But staff is recommending approval with those conditions, and that concludes my staff report.
Thank you, Angie. Questions for staff, commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. In item 7, it's kind of interesting to observe how we've kind of evolved from not having a lot to say about water to now we say a lot about water.
Yes.
But why are we concerned about irrigation? And Hyde Park City is not going to be the saying factor in the irrigation there regardless.
Yeah, it's just a matter of making sure they have the correct water rights for each part of the process. So if they already have water rights for irrigation that aren't Hyde Park, that's fine too.
So, but I guess still, I can't wrap my arms around why we're concerned about irrigation water.
Again, it's just part of the overall winery facility because you have to produce a certain percentage of the agriculture product on site in order to meet this definition. So irrigation would be a key part of that. So I don't think grapes are drought tolerant.
But again, in this scenario, Hyde Park City will not be the...
Yeah, and I remember with discussions with the applicant that I didn't think that was true either, but their letter of intent states that, so I just included both alternatives.
I just was curious, because I think, to me, some of that stuff's a little nitpicky, that if you're gonna grow crops, you're gonna have to have water, so.
Yeah. But again, I think it is supported by the definition requiring most of it to be produced on site.
Good point. The construction of the building, I can see what it shows on the plan there, that materials of construction will be stick-built, steel?
Yeah, I think it's just a,
I should probably look closer at that.
yeah, there might be an issue with height, so that is one of the conditions as well. On some of the elevations, it appears to exceed the maximum height allowed in that zone, but it is a condition of approval that we get more details on that and understand how the height's being measured and where, you know, because there is a bit of a slope, so.
That's the proponent.
Yeah, for sure. And then I have some questions just on the wastewater treatment system, but we can ask the proponent those.
Any other questions or comments for staff? Okay, let's have the proponent come up, if you'd like.
I'm Brenda Nickel, one of the owners for the project.
Okay,
He's also for the project.
did you drag Mr. Martin all the way up here?
Yes, we did. And to answer your
That's pretty nice.
technical questions.
Welcome to our cool Cache Valley. I understand it's been a little hot down there this year. So, it sounds like commissioners have a few questions for you.
Have him come up and introduce himself and.
If he's the one to answer, or if you guys can answer, that's
Depends
fine.
on the question.
Okay. Yeah, we'll wait.
What-
As soon as he's ready, then we'll have him up.
While you guys are up here then, are you very familiar with all of these conditions and what have you? You've read through them and you're comfortable with them?
Yeah, yes, the irrigation one I hadn't caught in there. I guess we have the water rights for that property, it's all irrigated property currently. Grapes are actually quite drought tolerant. They're extremely drought tolerant. Spain is one of the largest grape producers in the world and they have very little irrigation, it's almost entirely dry farmed.
It seems like there's so much water
A
inside.
couple of questions I had on there. The type of construction of the building is out of
We'll bring the engineer.
wood, steel, I'm just asking.
It'll be more standard construction, not like our barn is constructed. Concrete foundations, standard, up to stick framed.
Stick
up to-
frame, okay.
Yeah,
That's all really the
yeah, it'd be
question.
like, the plan is to be stone veneered, you know, something pretty and aesthetic for the area.
Okay, Mr. Martin, come on up, please.
Good evening, Commissioner Steve Martin from Sebastopol, California. And our firm, I think I've mentioned this, our firm specializes in the design and the planning, design, and construction of winery facilities, breweries, other food processing facilities. So I'm glad to be here in person because being on the speakerphone is very difficult to hear Angie. I'll be glad to answer any of your questions. In regards to the construction type, as Keith mentioned, it will be a type 5 building construction, which is concrete and wood frame. The steel is in there because we have a large, I think it's a 32-foot nano wall opening, so we'll have a moment resisting frame in that location. The lower level will be about 2/3 cut into the hillside, so we'll have natural cooling for the barrels, and of course will be reinforced concrete. Unfortunately, we have to bring in seismic loading into that wall these days. And then above that will be wood framed. It'll be designed with a stone veneer on the exterior, and we're chatting about kind of a historical Scottish influence into the design of the building, along with some of the modern features of it. I'm going to pivot now to, well, let me talk about the irrigation water. As Keith indicated, we verified that there's water rights for the irrigation of crops on the property, but I would like to point out that this is a CUP for the winery, and I think it's a little dangerous talking about the irrigation for the vineyard in this. I think it's rather benign how it's written in here and how we can satisfy it, but I think that's something that I'd just like to comment on. There's a condition, and I think it'd be helpful to turn to it, it's condition number 5. And Angie brought this up. Again, I'd like to thank Angie for her work on this, as well as Matt Phillips and Tim. They're a pleasure to work with. On condition number 5, prior to recording the permit, the applicant must submit a written definition for marking events. That will be included in the LOI packet. So that's simple for us to do, and we can expand on that. But what I'd like to point out is in the project description, which is also in your packet, about 3 pages, following items number 2 and 3 in our project description, we indicate that will include public tours, tastings, retail sales, and events. And then number 3 is wine education, seminars, workshops, and tastings. So that's more of a macro view of the marketing events, but within those there could be winemaker dinners, where you sit down and have a catered dinner come in, and then you have a food and wine pairing. In those events, you could have a wine club event where small wineries try to build their wine club so that they come to the site and you may have a release of a wine, and all your wine club members come to that event. They could include well, I've indicated here there's going to be educational seminars. There would be technical tasting where you sit down and you go through different varietals and or flights, meaning different years of wines. It's difficult to specify a quantity of each because they're a brand new operation. Even if they're in Napa Valley, it's difficult to do it. You have to kind of grow into your customer base. So I just want to provide that so you have more clarity on what those events or marketing events would be. The other condition, and I apologize, Angie, for not bringing this one up today, but is condition of approval 8A. Let me turn to that.
It's the encroachment permit.
So, prior to issuance of zoning clearance, we must obtain an encroachment permit to improve the private access within the county right of way, which is agreeable and straightforward. I'd just like to point out that is obtaining an encroachment permit and that the improvements would have to be completed prior to operation.
Yes, or prior to zoning clearance. Because
It's going to be dependent upon when pavement's available. That's why.
well, zoning clearance is when you would submit for the building and structure.
Right, but if we're submitting for the building permit,
Yeah,
and the plant's closed and we can't get pavement.
so you're very optimistic you're going to get this in by the winter. If that is the case, I'm sure, as Matt, the county engineer mentioned earlier, an in lieu fee could probably be done. So.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And as far as odors, I know it's indicated that would be mitigated because of the distance and the agricultural area. In wine production, especially this level, there are no obnoxious odors. You have fermentation, which is the fermenting of the grapes, and that occurs within tanks. The odors that are given off are actually rather sweet and fruit. And then in regards to wastewater systems, I think the commissioner had a question on that. That wastewater is piped down to septic settling tanks and then goes through an aerobic biofilter treatment and then is discharged in subsurface leach field. So we don't anticipate any odors from the wastewater.
So it's an aerobic process, you'll bubble water bubble air through the septic tank, basically, then?
Yeah, basically. It's called an Advantex membrane system. They're made by Orenco. We've talked to Richard Adair River Health about it as well. And there's a carbon filter on it for exhausting the air that it's producing, and we don't have any odors from those. And then after that, it's recirculated, settled, and then goes into a subsurface.
In your proposal, you have two options for wastewater treatment. Could you just go into?
Yeah, but the first option is as I just described.
That's your preferred option?
Correct. Secondly, I put the second option in there in case we were also looking at combining fire protection water storage with the reservoir. But I don't see that as being the process wastewater system that we would choose. I wanted to put it in there. Also, in regards to water use and water generation, this is combining domestic water as well as processed water used in light making operation. It will be on an annual average of 325 gallons per day. So a 3-bedroom residence is 450 gallons per day. So the water use generated here will be less than a 3-bedroom residence. Those are the points I've made. If you have any other questions, I'd be glad to address them.
Any other questions, commissioners?
Just a quick question in that wastewater. So is Ravenstone Winery part of Mount Naomi, or is that a?
Answer that.
Yeah.
You better answer that. Originally, that was going to be the name. It's now planned to be Mount Naomi Winery.
Oh, okay.
That name, in the wine industry, it's very hard to find an original name, because you're talking worldwide, what that name could be, and then there's huge conglomerate groups that have lots of attorneys. And the word Raven is a trigger word in the wine industry that I didn't want to bring down the wrath of almighty Constellation on me.
That's okay, I just was.
Mount Naomi wasn't taken.
Yeah,
Good for us.
I also designed Ravenswood Winery, which is, I call it now a wine refinery. They're up to about 1 million cases. So that's the winery that Keith's referring to.
As a wine drinker, I recognize that, so. Others?
Just a question maybe for Tim, on that 8A, I mean, I think to me it makes sense. You get the permit before you get the zoning clearance.
Correct.
And then probably when they get their building permit, apply for that, they would have to then have that access completed before they get their final occupancy permit for the facility.
Conditional
Isn't that
use.
generally when it would come in? Yeah, the conditional use is you have to do it, and here's the permit to do it.
And the
You do it
recording,
during the construction, and that's at your final inspection.
the drawings and the approval of conditional use drawings, the recording of those, then zoning clearance permits, and then building
Yeah,
permits.
so see, there wouldn't be any lieu and fee to get that permit. You would get the permit to do the encroachment, and you would do that during construction throughout that year.
And you're saying the conditional use is recorded after construction?
No, before it starts.
Oh, okay, before it starts.
So that's why you've got to get the permit first.
I thought there was some.
But you don't have to do any construction before that's recorded.
Yeah, so we would respectfully request that it be written as is. And if you're concerned about the improvements actually occurring after the encroachment permit is issued, then it could be prior to issuance of the zoning clearance and encroachment permit for said work shall be acquired, and improvements shall be constructed prior to operation.
Yeah, I think that usually gets just put in with the building permit as part of it. You have to have that done to get the final.
Final of the building permit.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think, I don't
Agree
think
with
we need
that.
it in here. I think this, to me, this makes sense. But as long as staff is understanding it the same way, they just got to get the permit.
We do defer to Public Works and their knowledge of their standards and as Angie's mentioned, the alternatives they have and the timing that could be explored, but we need his specific guidance on that.
Yeah, I think.
I apologize. I have one more comment, and there's a comment in regards to the building height. And we have reviewed the building height criteria and the calculation of that criteria. I didn't include it on the elevation, but we do meet the building height criteria. And as Angie pointed out, we would have to show that prior to the plans.
Anything else, commissioners? Okay, thank you, Mr. Martin.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. For a conditional use permit, it's not required that we have a public hearing, but is there anybody here that would like to speak to this item tonight? Okay, seeing none. Commissioners, what would you like to do?
Just one item I'd like to bring up ahead of this. I've read these conditions multiple times. Do we address wastewater in there? Normally in these situations where we specify a septic tank or wastewater system, that is part of the condition. They gain approval from the Bearville Health Department. And I've read it a couple of times, but I don't know that we've got one in there. Am I missing it? Just included in one of those conditions? And while we're looking at that, my further point to that is that we have two proposals for wastewater treatment systems in the actual proposal. One being much more involved and having much more potential to have deleterious effects. And so my point would be in a condition that we develop, that if the applicant determined to use that secondary type of treatment, that they would get an additional approval or an amendment to the CUP. And my point is that it probably bears much more discussion on that type of a wastewater treatment system, whereas what I see with the septic tank with maybe some aeration in there probably doesn't. That's fairly similar to what we normally deal with, and maybe it's something that we can deal with the Bearville Health Department, gaining approval. But anyway, my point is an above ground wastewater treatment system has more impacts on the community, and so that's the point. Did I miss it in the conclusion?
No, you did not.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just looking to, and yeah, you did not miss it. In the staff report itself, I put, the applicant must work with Bear River Health Department to obtain a septic permit prior to issuance of zoning clearance for the proposed structure. So we could just take that and add that as an additional condition, if that works for you.
Is that acceptable?
Yeah.
So-
And on the second point, where we,
Condition 15.
condition 15, okay, where we have two proposals in there, we want to add some language, and maybe the other commissioners don't have any issue with the secondary type. I just look at an above ground treatment as a much greater impact, and maybe deserves conditions around that, or at least more information in the plan on the specifics about that. If we're talking a lagoon, size and liners, and there are many things that go into that. And so my thought on this is maybe we put in that same condition, if the applicant determines to use their second proposal, that it comes back for an amendment. And they may not, they may want to leave that open.
Yeah,
I feel more confident in saying a septic tank, that's easy, that's a lot easier for me to say, yeah, let's move ahead with this versus the other.
Yeah, I was just going to point out something in the code that I don't know if will ease your concern about that, and I'm not finding it right now. But we do specifically say with regards to septic, the Bear River Health Department is the expert for the county. So typically, if they say something can be approved and it's in line with the code, then we'll default to their expertise But either way, I'm sure you can do that.
And the applicant stated, you know, if the amount of wastewater is as they represent, it's probably not a major impact. So I'll just put that on the record.
The wafting fermenting grapes will probably smell better than when the dairy's wastewater pond is pumped and spread out in the field next door.
And our neighbors have a lagoon that is
Totally,
phenomenally large.
totally get it.
Much smaller.
This would be less than 50,000 gallons.
Mhm.
Be tiny pond. You know,
I would imagine, I think that any, no, they're not gonna want next to their
Or our
facility
wedding
anyways.
venues for that matter.
Okay.
Are we good?
Are you okay with the?
Yeah, I think if we just add that as that is, and I'll leave my comments in the minutes.
Good. Any other thoughts, comments?
I just think it's awesome to see.
I do think, his comment about the irrigation could be taken out pretty easily, because if we put that in there, so he's just gotta grow the grapes himself, but not on this parcel, right, according to the code. On his farm, he's gotta produce those grapes. He could lease 20 acres down the road on a 20-year lease, so he knows he can put that and grow those there. So I think I mean, I know this is only our second one, so you know, we're still learning how to do it, but I think, yeah, in future ones, having that irrigation tied to it, it doesn't make sense in this scenario, because that farm could be thousands of acres. They could grow those grapes anywhere in the county and still qualify for the 51% grown here. We're not gonna check all their parcels to make sure their irrigation rights are up to
And
date.
what are we really concerned about on this, that they have adequate culinary water
Yeah.
provision for visitors?
And fire and stuff they need for the building itself really there.
So is that something we wanna remove then?
Yeah, I think we could scratch all the stuff about irrigation out of 7. Just so it's, people don't look 10 years down the road and say, well, you made them do irrigation, so you should make this one do irrigation.
And if Hyde Park City,
Yeah, if they're gonna do
becomes
the
short on
culinary-
water and they say,
Well, it's not even Hyde Park City, it's the Highline Irrigation
and
Company.
that's a good point of clarification as well.
Cleans it up a little bit.
And just as an aside, it was totally benign, so yeah, had no idea what caused it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, we have.
staff could be referring to landscape irrigation, not irrigation for production, so.
And
There's that.
Angie, none of that was against you. Just-
So I think that change is simply striking the word irrigation.
It's just water rights for the.
Just one
facility
word,
itself.
right? Okay. Okay, so we have a couple of amendments to the conditions. Anything else? Brady?
I just think it's awesome to see the fruits of our labors and working with Keith and other folks here to put this together, to now see it moving forth with both of them
Yes.
and going, so,
We're fermenting apples and grapes.
yeah,
A beautiful thing.
without further delay, I'd move that we approve the Mount Naomi Winery CUP with 14.
15.
So we added that 15th then regarding the wastewater.
Yes.
So regarding the 15 conditions and 4 conclusions.
I second the motion.
Just 3 conclusions.
3 conclusions, okay, backwards.
Your second on that, Jason?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to approve Mount Naomi Winery conditional use permit with 15 conditions and 3 conclusions. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay,
Thank you.
good job.
All the real scary stuff again.
Okay, commissioners, our next item on the agenda is the Cherry Peak Ski Area, CUP, Fourth Amendment. Start with a staff report.
Yes, so this is a request to amend the CUP to increase the maximum number of people allowed on site from 1,000 people per day, including visitors and employees, to 4,000 visitors per day. I've gone through a brief history of the different CUPs just to give you some context and where we're at. But as far as operational aspects of the facility and that 1,000 people, person limit. That was part of the first amendment to the CUP. Subsequent amendments really were just related to boundary adjustments due to the subdivision that the recreational facility is part of. So again, as mentioned before, the code directs the land use authority to review conditional use permit requests based on standards and criteria that include compliance with law, health, safety, and welfare, adequate service provision, impacts, and mitigation. So as far as compliance with the law goes, it does fall under the use type recreational facility for the Cache County Code. It is in compliance with that as approved under the First Amendment approval. It does permit this as a use in the CUP if reviewed and approved in accordance with the conditional use review procedures. Another portion of the Cache County Code that's applicable here is from Chapter 8.40.030, which is 8.4 is the special events section of the code. And requires a special event permit, but there are exceptions. It requires a special event permit for an event with or without charge for admission on public or private property. They have to get a special event permit granted for that specific event and its venue. But there are exceptions, and that includes any event not included in a CUP or an approved event where there is a material change or intensification of the approved activities requires an amendment to the CUP. So in November, so that first amendment that allowed up to 1,000 people also allowed the applicant the ability to file special event permits for events with more than 1,000. That again was approved in 2016. In November 2019, Ordinance 2019-07 was approved by the Cache County Council that instituted several changes to Chapter 8.4, Special Events of the County Code. The condition of approval from the first CUP required, as I mentioned, the approved special event permit. But with the changes to the code, special event permits do not apply and cannot be issued for activities or uses that require a CUP. And any event not included in the CUP requires an amendment to that CUP. So again, with that change in code, that requirement for a special event permit is now moot and is no longer applicable. As far as health, safety, and welfare, proposed CUP must not be detrimental to the public health, safety, and welfare of persons residing or working in the vicinity, or injurious to property or improvements in the vicinity. It should be considered detrimental if it causes unreasonable risk to the safety of persons or properties because of vehicular traffic or parking or other similar risks. So again, the applicant submitted this request to increase the number of people from 1,000 to 4,000 visitors per day, but did not provide any, but explicitly said there's no new construction or no additional improvements that will be part of this amendment. They were required to submit a parking analysis as part of this application to support their request for the increase of 4,000 people. The study was done by the applicant's engineering firm based on their analysis of existing on-site parking as well as temporary off-site parking areas. Again, no new permanent parking areas were proposed to accommodate the increase in people per day on-site. Upon receiving that, the Public Works Director contracted with a consultant group, Wall Consultant Group, WCG, as a third-party engineering firm to review that parking analysis and provide feedback and document specific recommendations related to traffic circulation and parking impacts that should be considered and addressed as part of a CUP application process. So they provided a technical memorandum, which is one of your attachments. And again, the attachments are separate in your shared drive from the staff report. But based on their review of the parking analysis, they concluded that the applicant's analysis does not adequately identify or address access, parking, circulation, and traffic impacts related to the health, safety, and welfare of the general public. Two primary examples that were the basis for their findings include proposed shuttle services and parking access, circulation, and operations. I've included quite a few quotes directly from that memorandum, from that attachment in here. But again, it's just, in conclusion, they find that the applicant does not adequately identify all of those impacts related to the health, safety, and welfare of the general public. As far as adequate service provision, the county land use ordinance states that the proposed conditional use must not result in a situation that creates a need for essential services that cannot be reasonably met by local service providers, including but not limited to roads and year-round access for emergency vehicles and residents, fire protection, law enforcement protection, schools and school busing, potable water, septic sewer, stormwater drainage, and garbage removal. So as far as roadway access, I did note in the history of the CUPs that there have been issues related to road improvements on 11,000 North, and it ultimately fell to the county to make the improvements to get it to the county standard. But it does, 11,000 North is an existing county facility that provides access to residential lots, but mainly provides access to the ski recreational facility. Classified as a major local road, is substandard as to required travel lane width, paved and gravel shoulders, and clear zone. The recreational facility does have unpermitted driveway access points that need to meet current standards. Again, the letter of intent states no new construction is proposed, including no new road improvements. Increasing the number of people and vehicular trips is an intensification of the currently approved CUP and requires that the access road be brought into compliance with the current standards. And the standards can't be met without construction. With regards to fire protection and emergency response, one of your attachments, attachment G, is from the fire chief, Rod Hammer, who is present to answer any questions. He submitted a letter for the Planning Commission strongly opposing this proposed CUP. He points out that the original approval was for a small ski resort with less than 1,000 users throughout the day, and winter conditions do not raise wildfire concerns, excuse me. While the proposed increase in people on site during summer events gathered together at the same time, there is a significant risk to public safety, and not just from wildfires, but other weather, lightning, or active shooter events. The existing facility is located in a box canyon with no secondary exit, and the current access road is too narrow to allow rapid evacuation out of the facility and still allow emergency services and vehicles to respond to a public safety emergency. The chief has acknowledged that the fire district has attempted in the past to mitigate the risks through the special event permit process by having fire units on scene and enforcing parking and traffic codes. However, those mitigation measures would not be able to protect the public if conditions resulted in extreme fire behavior. Finally, he states that he strongly supports the denial of this CUP until such time as the facility is redesigned as a concert venue, and he is not aware of any other business operation that requires fire units on standby to operate.
Where did you just read them last ones about fire and what have you?
Page 8.
Yeah, 17. And then the actual letter from the chief is attachment G. Utah code states that a conditional use permit shall be approved if reasonable conditions are proposed or can be imposed to mitigate the reasonably anticipated detrimental effects of the proposed use in accordance with applicable standards. Our county land use code also stipulates that reasonably anticipated detrimental effects of the proposed conditional use must be substantially mitigated by the proposal or by the imposition of reasonable conditions to achieve compliance with applicable standards. And as shown in the findings of fact in the staff report, there are a number of known serious detrimental effects that the approval of this proposed CUP amendment would create. Further, the applicant in their proposal has provided no mitigation measures in their letter of intent, and there are no reasonable conditions that can be imposed to substantially mitigate these detrimental impacts. So staff is recommending denial of the CUP amendment based on the 6 conclusions that include it is not in compliance with law, health, safety, and welfare, adequate service provisions. The applicant has the burden of proof to show that the applicant meets the requirements of this chapter for their proposed conditional use permit amendment. And again, the letter of intent specifically says there'll be no changes to the operation of the facility or any new construction proposed to accommodate the increase in people. Conditional uses state the purpose of the CUP process is to evaluate possible adverse impacts and to minimize them where possible through the imposition of specific conditions of approval. If adverse impacts cannot be appropriately resolved, the use may be denied as identified in the section and state code. If the land use authority determines that the standards of this section cannot be met and that adequate mitigation measures cannot be imposed to bring the use into conformity with the standards and criteria, the land use authority may deny the request for the CUP. And again, just special event permits do not apply and cannot be issued for activities or uses that require a CUP. So yeah, based on those conclusions and the findings of fact that are supported by substantial evidence, staff is recommending denial of this CUP request. That concludes staff's report.
Thank you, Angie. Questions, comments for staff?
I've got one maybe clarification. So do I read it right? When the applicant first applied, getting a special use permit for these bigger events was allowed?
Yes. Mhm.
And then during the process since then, so that in the middle of that roughly, the county code changed to no longer allow that, thus bringing kind of to the point we're at now.
Correct.
To still have those events that were allowed when he got the first one, he has to get this modified or code would have to change again to allow those under conditional use.
Correct.
That's even without applying. There's just no option now to even apply for a permit.
Not if there's a CUP, and the CUP would include that type of.
So is that kind of what 8 and 9 means?
8 and 9 of just the staff report?
Yeah, well, or 9 and 10, 8
Yes.
8 to 10.
Yeah, that refers to compliance with the law as far as the Cache County Code is.
Okay, so but how does that work? How can we take an existing CUP that we've approved and set up to function, and they build their business plan, and then we change that mid-deal, so then they can now no longer do what they, how does that work?
It works by doing a CUP amendment to allow that and to create a venue that accommodates that without all of this additional support and fire units on site, et cetera.
But then when you do the CUP amendment, then you gotta start all over again, meeting new requirements, correct?
In this case, yes, if you're going from that increase from 1,000, which was what was approved, to the 4,000 that they're asking for, without any special event permits.
Because to me, it doesn't make sense to the public that if we approve them to start with and they build their business plan, and then
But we didn't approve them for 4,000 people.
no.
But they have the option to do that with special.
We approved it for 1,000, but
Continue
with
to
the
do what
option.
they're doing for 1,000, but now they.
But they
But they could
still
get the
had that
special
option.
use, they could get the special event permit originally,
Right.
which now they can't.
That's the only concern that I have here, is then when we change it mid-term, I just don't feel it's, I mean, I don't know how many businesses we've approved that's impacted, but
Well, it's very similar to any other development standards or
To
use
where?
types. It's very similar to any other kind of CUP-approved use, that it was approved at the time under these rules and requirements. Times change, or, the code changes over time, because it's very fluid, and then it becomes kind of legal non-conforming. But if they want to intensify that use or expand that use, they now have to, comply with the current code.
We didn't call out a special event permit in the original CUP, correct?
Not in the original, it was, it was part of the second one where they added the summer activities with concerts and other activities. So that was where the 1,000-person cap was specifically listed as a condition of approval, and the requirement for special event permits.
Anything over that 1,000.
Angie, can you think, or Tim, off the top of your head, do we have any other current CUPs out there that this would affect? I mean, I can't think of any, but it still just bothers me, or it doesn't make sense that we could change their business midstream after they'd already. And we're not ready for public comment yet, but.
This is not the public, this is the interim
Well,
director of development services.
So you are with the county?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, could I just ask a quick question? Dirk Anderson, interim director, don't blame me for not recognizing me, that's okay.
Sorry.
You haven't come in for any zoning changes
I
or
haven't.
anything like that, so. I'm interested, what change are you talking about? that something changed midstream, because I'm not following.
So he was able to get a special use permit for bigger events, a special event permit for bigger events over 1,000 after that second amendment to his CUP. And then a couple years later, the county code changed to where CUPs could no longer get special.
It was actually
event
7 years
permits.
later, 7 years later.
And so he was able to operate for 7 years under the, if I want a big event in the summer, at least this is the way I read it, and I could be wrong, that he could get that special event permit. And then the county code changed, and so now you can't get the special event permit. Now you've got to amend your CUP to meet our new code.
Do you agree with that?
But and so he wasn't asking to change his operation. We said, you've got to ask to change it because we changed the code on you. That's the way I read it. And I think that's what Brady's saying, but
So
maybe I'm reading it wrong.
That's my concern.
And the permit dealt with all the safety issues at that time, and the permit wouldn't have been issued if they felt it wasn't safe.
For 1,000 people.
That
Yeah, it's
is
change in the.
an assumption I wouldn't make.
But the permit was issued,
That is accurate,
okay.
but what you said may not be a good assumption.
The conditions to get that permit were met.
But even that may not be accurate.
Yeah.
If I could just,
Okay.
I hope John knows that John and I have worked very closely together over the last few months on the special event permits. And I am a very strong proponent of a government not getting in the way for no reason of citizens needing to use their land to the utmost. I can tell you that I've only been interim for about, I think I'm up to 10 weeks now, something like that. And there have been many cases where individuals are not allowed to do something with their land simply for instance, this week we had one, just because they didn't have a secondary access to their property. Just because of that, they're not able to build. And by the way, that included a law change that happened between the time they bought their land and now, because now they're applying for a certain type of permit, and the law changed since they bought their land. I can tell you that what's being focused on right now is a valid concern about things changing midstream, so to say. However, I think that a good thing to look at would be the fact that they were originally approved for 1,000 in their amendment. And if you wanted it, and what's in the staff report, there are major concerns by our professionals on our staff about safety, and from the roads to fire, and the fact that the special event permits were approved isn't, yeah, so they were approved.
But we have to put ourselves at the same point. We have to think, so if this was my business, if this was your business, and you built this business plan, and you build it off what you could do, and you're doing that, and then somebody changes their mind, and I'm not saying they're not valid points, but how can we come back and change their business plan, the invested money, whatever else they put into that? I could see if you bought a piece of land and you don't have a permit and something changes, that's the way the cookie crumbles. But if you have a
The
permit,
reality is, they didn't,
They
the
can
permit,
still
they can still have
do
1,000.
the business that they came before us and got approved for.
well, how are you
There's no
gonna get a
change to that.
second entrance up that canyon?
They can't do that, but if they want 4,000 people, there's some other conditions they have to meet, and they're not meeting.
And that's the thing, is the
I can make
CUP
this
was
really
based around.
Yeah, it's okay, we'll have you come up in a minute, John.
The CUP was based on 1,000, and there was also the option for a special event for above 1,000 people, but that was part of another code. I mean, that was never part of the CUP.
So I guess,
You know, that
maybe,
those would
yeah.
be allowed. That was something that was a separate code aside from that, and codes changed.
Well, I definitely don't wanna hold the conversation or the process up. It's just a concern. I've seen like the dog kennel change. And I totally understand that if you had a dog kennel approved before, I don't know if they're going back now
But I
saying,
don't-
now you've gotta have decibel bills and whatever else.
I don't see this as an existing non-conforming, you know, because they can conform to the standard at 1,000 people. It's something that was beyond the CUP, was going over and above
Okay.
that.
I'll just listen.
That's my angle. I get your point. I don't, and just as Dirk said, I don't think government should stand in the way of some things, but I don't think that's really what we're talking about today. I don't think that a certain set of rules was really there, wasn't set out in the CUP. They were allowed up to 1,000 people.
Yeah, and if you were listening closely, the rules were set out and the rules weren't followed. And the county came in and bailed them out when it comes to the road improvements and stuff like that. And
Not true.
It is true. It's absolutely true.
When I talk, you'll understand.
I'm pretty certain I trust county staff on this issue.
Okay?
And,
I'll just comment on it when it's my turn.
okay, that sounds good, but certainly as a taxpayer and a business owner who likes to follow the rules and wants everybody else to follow the rules too, I don't like that idea at all, that the rest of us are having to pay to subsidize this business because they couldn't do it the right way the first time. So that's a little craw in my bonnet. So yeah, sometimes. Anyway, other comments or thoughts?
If this is still the period for staff comment, and then that might end, other than questions, I can say that just as a personal observer, having been up there on ski days that are really busy, it's busy, and but that's been allowed. And I worked really closely with John and the staff when we went up for the special events. And when we approved those special events this spring, summer, we were worried about something happening. So I went up there and observed during the night. And we had the fire guys go up with us. And I think really the part of the biggest concern that we would think about is just the fact that there's one road going in and out of that. And if any even accident happened, just on exiting those, hours and hours it's going to be to remove that and get people out of there. And we even had, and I know it's just anecdotal and it's not super positive, John, I'm sorry, but even on the night where we had the mud in the lower fields, so the buses had to stop, and they were doing their best, but they had to stop on the road. That created enough time that by the time some of the people were coming down, we had a window smashed out, and honestly, it's just because people were cranky and having to be up there for that long. That's not John's fault, right? But I'm just kind of sharing that when you don't have that flow even there, it creates a concern. And so I know that our fire chief and his staff have worked hard to analyze this and to be fair. And they're just facing a situation that it's really hard to say that it would be safe on a continual basis. The thing to think about is when you approve a CUP for this amount, that means they could have this type of event any day of the year, all year. And so, I don't know. So that I would say to sum up, if I hope I'm not overemphasizing something out of turn from our staff. To sum up, I'd say it comes down to that one entrance or that one road, being able to go in and out. And Matt has told me several times that road was built for a ski lodge, for that use as well. And so having those buses go up and down on that for a big event is a different issue.
So from staff's perspective, I mean, it sounds like there's really not anything that can be done unless it's have a second access somehow, right? Like, without the second access,
yeah,
the rest of the stuff that we talk about is...
And there are other concerns, but I'd say that is probably the biggest concern. So, I mean, the staff report is excellent and raises several concerns, but it really comes down to that being the biggest one. I am not trying to kill this for John, But to say that I wasn't nervous every night when they had the bigger concerts up there, wouldn't be honest. Especially after going there for the first one, and then actually not going up there for the other ones, I was just waiting, and I didn't know. And there are multiple things that have to happen and have to all come together, including calling EMS and making sure that we've got the right staff and the right, and we worked on those things to make sure that those things were in place. And then you've got the parking issue. I mean, it's just, I support our staff recommendation. I love John, love Cherry Peak, but for this type of conditional use that would be going on continually, we just can't support that.
Any other questions? Hey, John, come on up, please.
Okay, I gotta get something off my chest. I like Dirk, and I will continue to like Dirk. However, good man. And it's so frustrating sitting out here because I have all the answers of things that you're worried about that aren't a problem anymore. But I want to give you a little bit of history. When we first applied, and they said, what do you think, how many skiers do you think you're going to have? And I said, well, we could have up to an average of 1,000 people a day. We didn't understand originally that when you put 1,000, that's the max. We thought it was, you know, we're saying this is what our average would be. Our average isn't there yet, but it'll get to that point. So the number I'm most concerned about is raising the 1,000 a little bit, not concerts. So anyway, we're doing concerts, and we were told at the time, and I don't think any of the staff that's here was here originally, but I said, what about the concerts during the summer? Oh, well, that doesn't need to be on your conditional use permit. That's just an individual application each time. So 3 years ago, Chris Hurrill said, we're getting tired of filling out these conditional applications, special event applications. It'll be really easy. Let's put this into your CUP, and at the time, the number we were talking about was up to 6,000. We did have one concert that was in the neighborhood of about 5,000. Provide a parking plan, and the fire marshal has the right to shut down any concert if he doesn't feel good about parking or busing or anything. So that was an approved application. I think it was August of 2019. And here's where the county blew it, and it's been very costly to me. So we immediately got Alliance Consulting Engineers on a plan because one of the conditions, Brett Christensen did improvements to the road, and in certain areas he didn't have enough pit run, and so some areas were failing. We'd already fixed it one other time, and then there's additional problems. So we go in and we get engineering plans, we give them to Jonathan Bingham, who was the county engineer at the time, put it up. I can go get the exact date, but it was either September or October in the fall of 2019. In March of and we have to get it done by, was it the end of July or 1st of August, something like that. So we submit the plans. We go in March to get in the Kurt Facer's, Facer, the contractor, went in to get an encroachment permit. Jonathan Bingham had that, the engineering on that all fall, all winter, and into the spring, and hadn't even looked at it. So now, we're pushing Jonathan Bingham to look at these plans and get them approved, or so we can get them changed. Alliance is getting over here, meeting with him. We're pushing and pushing and pushing. Well, I'm out of town. I can't look at it now. I've got a big backlog. We don't get an approval, and meanwhile, I'm with Kurt Facer. Is that his name? Justin Facer. Oh, I know Kurt as much. Okay, yeah, Justin Facer. Yeah, John will get it. Yeah, John will get it. Yeah, John, I'll make sure I get it done. We weren't getting plans. We finally got the plans approved, and we can go back and see what date it was. We asked Facer to do it, and he says, I can't do it until 2 weeks before your deadline. We get a call from him like a week before, 2 weeks before the deadline, and have to find another contractor. He says, I'm too busy, I can't do it. So we go to Lane Christensen, who's a contractor in Richmond. He gets up there and starts working with it. Partway in, he's doing some patches, and I don't know who it was from the county, but there's the big compactors, and then there's the small compactors. Most of these patches are like 6 feet by 10, 6 by 20, 8 by 20. And he's, when I say compactor, a roller for the surface, right? And he's up there, and someone from the county says, wait, he's not using a big roller. And he says, well, there's not a code that says I have to use a big roller on a patch. So the county tells him to go ahead and finish it up. He was 1 day away from having all the patches done when he gets a cease and desist on the job. Then, and then our permit expires. He then has a heart attack, and he says, well, when I get better, I'll go back into the county, and we'll work this out and see if I need to use a bigger roller or whatever. He had a heart attack, and before he could get back on the job, the county says, we're just gonna take care of it and send you the bill, okay? We wouldn't even be in this situation had Jonathan Bingham not sat on those plans for months after months after months. Working with the county has been a total moving target, and that doesn't mean that I hate everybody at the county. At times I do hate the process. Totally hate the process, because you can't possibly understand what I've gone through, and neither can Angie, all the different iterations. And yeah, I can explain it all to you, but we'd be here like 7 hours. But the fact is, we had an approved application, and it wasn't our fault that the road didn't get done. It was the county's fault, okay? Now, that aside, it's more important for me to increase the capacity a little bit for skiing than it is for concerts. And I understand everyone's concerns regarding concerts. We can have concerts in other places. We want to have them at the resort, and it's really kind of comical how it's a moving target. Like 1 year you can do up to 6,000, and then, oh, wait a minute, it's a change of opinion. You know, I'm not trying to get you to approve the concerts at all, but I will say this. Alton and Snowbird are in the Box Canyon. They're handling a lot bigger capacity than we ever dreamed of. And anyway, I could go on forever, so I'll just shut up, but I will say this. I would ask for you not to close the CUP application, but let us make some changes to it that are more palatable to you and readdress it. Because every time you close it, then I have to go get another title report and more fees. And this was submitted in June, and we got a report back on September 30th, which gives us no time to prepare in a way to handle any of these concerns. So what I would ask is that you vote to let us just leave it open and address some things, take some things out to make it more palatable for Broadhammer and everybody. I might even say no more concerts out there altogether, because it's just driving me absolutely insane. Okay, but I would like to reapply and maybe not even include the concerts and just say, let's increase the capacity on the...
So staff, if we continue this, is it okay for them to make changes to their application, or how do we need to handle this?
Well, the application was specific to increasing capacity. I had understood 4 concerts, or was it concerts and skiing? Or?
It's for concerts and skiing, but skiing doesn't need that big number. So we were advised, we'll just put the concert number and the skiing number will all automatically apply. So Chris Realberry, before he left, he says, all I care regarding your capacity for skiing is, if there's a parking stall, we're good. We can't have anybody, parking in the road. But maybe you want us to readdress it and just say, okay, here's one application regarding concerts. Here's an application regarding ski capacity, and readdress it like that. But the real rub, guys, is I had an approved application. The county didn't get it done in time, and then when I go back and say, okay, 2 or 3 weeks later, it's done now. It start all over again, and then all the rules change? Yeah, there's no equity in that. And any one of you would be pretty ticked about it, just like I am.
Sure. I can appreciate that you have your opinion on how events transpired and everything. And so, I just want to know if the commission is required or being asked to continue this item if that allows the applicant to amend their application.
Well, may I ask a question?
In the past, haven't we? I think there's been applications that have, we've given them 90 days or whatever to go back and work with staff on questions and adjustments in there. So
What I really want you to do is say, let's go back to the original that's approved in 2019 because we messed up, and let's go inspect to make sure everything on that was done. That's what would be equitable. I don't expect it, but that's really what would be equitable.
Did you have a question?
Well, I think Mr. Hammer's letter here, and just to clarify, your letter is solely regarding summer activities, correct?
Correct.
Doesn't, nothing to do with winter.
The 1-year time period starts from when we approve it to when they have to have it recorded. That's
Done.
the time period that you can't adjust until you get to the end of that 12 months. You can ask for the extension. They can check on it when I look. We had to continue it for 90 days and let's work out some options.
Mr. Hammer, maybe can you come up and let us ask a question or two?
Yes, sir.
First,
Rod Hammer.
thank you. Is there any increase in the number that is acceptable, or is it staff, you know, fire departments feeling that anything more than 1,000 is a cause of concern?
I think I'd have to go back and look
For
at
summer.
that. I mean, part of the problem we have is International Fire Code doesn't deal well with outdoor venue stuff. So if we try to apply occupancy loads to outdoor venues, they don't make sense. And when we start to look at some of these other things, then we have to make judgments. And we have to say, well, what are the conditions? What's the canyon like? What's the vegetation like? What are the conditions like? And what we're talking here is really a low frequency, extremely high risk event. And we have sprinklers in this room in case of fire. It's unlikely that we'll have a fire when somebody's in here, but we still have to have sprinklers. So it's really unlikely that there will be a fire, that the conditions will be exactly right to have a fire at this canyon when there's a concert, but under the right conditions, it would result in loss of life. So if we had a situation where they have the parking, the ability to shelter in place, and we could look at those numbers, then we might be able to come up with something, a legitimate, scientific-based, data-based decision, rather than just pull something from the air.
Right. So aren't the issues, I mean, outside of the fire danger, there's capacity of the road, how much traffic it can handle in the time frame that is needed. There's the capacity of the parking area. What other metrics should we be looking at or considering?
Those are really the two we have to look at. You know, we have to have the ability, because we can't egress if there's a fire down canyon. It's not gonna be possible. So everything has to shelter in place. We can't have people driving down the canyon when emergency vehicles are trying to come up, because it won't work. So those are really the two things. How many people can we shelter in place in the event of a fire? And look at a couple of metrics there. You know, what are people going to do when there's a fire below? Are they going to shelter? Are they going to panic and run? Are they going to be clogging things up and losing their minds? And I can show you some video that's pretty pertinent to that. But those are the things we have.
Okay. And we haven't looked at it in this way so far, right? In that a number's been set, 1,000, through this earlier CUP, the original CUP process. But no one has looked at, I don't think, and said, in order to allow for additional capacity, you know, the road can allow for this much more, and the parking area can allow for this much more. I mean, that hasn't been evaluated at this point yet, right?
No,
To come up with a
I
number.
think they've looked at, and I might be speaking out of place on the roads. They've done traffic surveys and how many people are on that road at a given amount of time and what the capacity of the road is. That's not really what I'm looking at because it's really a zero-sum effect. Nobody can use that road if there's a fire below. So regardless of number, road condition doesn't change for emergency vehicles to come in. Parking does have an effect, and like you said, you know, Snowbird and some of these larger resorts have much larger parking areas. And so you have a greater distance from vegetation to shelter, and safer zones. And Beaver's the same way. You have a much larger parking lot, and people are able to shelter or move away from the fire much easier than they are with the situation.
Okay.
I would just point out
Mr.
on
Chairman?
that, as far as Snowbird and Alda, they have fire stations built. Unified Fire Authority has fire stations right there in Allentown and up at Brighton as well. And so that's a major difference is that emergency services are there.
Mr. Chairman, I just had one question. I mean, I just would hope, based on the comments that I made, and I think we're all gonna be a lot more aware moving ahead of the points that we're making now, and, you know, cause none of this has changed from when, as well as I think you guys were on board when this initial application come on.
Yeah,
It's just something that we've gotta make sure that we thoroughly go through all this stuff, because we allow somebody to invest in and build what they built and then change on them. But aside from that, one thought that I had, and I do value and appreciate everything that you're presenting here, would it even be worth considering if the parking space was adequate, because it sounds like right now, from what I'm understanding or digesting, it doesn't matter if there's 1,000 or 6,000 people up there, it's not gonna be the cars coming down because they're not gonna happen. If you've got a problem down below, you're gonna stop all that to let emergency vehicles up.
if we can.
Okay, but
So-
regardless of that even, what I was wanting to ask you is just common sense with where we live here. Do you feel if the parking was adequate, if accessibility either by bus or personal vehicle was adequate, could we identify, you know, up till June 1st, we're fairly safe? I mean, I recognize every year in the last 3, 4, maybe 5 years, we've been in sincere drought. And maybe, you know, maybe whether it's June 1st or July 1st, that's hard to this year sit and peg next year. But is there some common sense that we could look at there, pending the other stuff meets up or lines up, that we could say, you know, based upon the water that we've received, the rain we've received, the greenness, it might not be a concern till July 1st, but after July 1st, there's no way. And I recognize venues have to be scheduled long ways in advance. They can't wait till a month before, but do you see anything in that at all if we looked at any, or if we was to give any consideration to that?
Yeah, I mean, if we wanted to look down that path, we actually did that this year on the concerts, the special events that you requested. We set criteria based on fuel moisture, temperature, and then some of the state red flag laws and that kind of stuff. And we said that when our fuel moistures are below 125%, and these are BLM data that we use to decide this, and the temperature's above 90 degrees, then the concert shut down. We gave them that information 3 days before the concert. And those were special events that we're very aware of. We're tracking, we know the dates, we know all that kind of stuff. The problem comes when you allow a CUP that has 4,000 anytime, then we may or may not be aware of what the events are. I think it would be a burden to look at a business on a daily or weekly deal and say, oh, the temperature's gonna be over this, so you can't have the event you planned tonight, and I don't think that's fair to them to shut it down the day of the event. That's why we went 3 days ahead. Now, the temperatures may have varied, but we do look at fuel moisture, we did look at ignition potential to try to get them through these special events this year. Last year, their concert in July was the first one, and it was, you know how the drought was last year, and we simply said after that mid-July, we shut down the Granger Smith concert, I think, and just said, you know, we just can't have it. So they moved those to the school, the high school. But again, low frequency, high risk. And where do we draw the line, and how much maintenance do we need to maintain on a given business to ensure that they're okay today, but they might not be okay tomorrow? That's the hard thing we come up against under those conditions. Now, is it something we can look at? Absolutely.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, thank you for that perspective. So, hang on just a second, Mr. Chadwick. So we're coming up on our mandated end of our meeting. So, John, if we continue it up to 90 days, is that enough time?
Can I make a couple comments before I answer that?
You
Real
got
quick.
30 seconds.
First of all, I pretty well agree with everything Rod said. I never intended to have 4,000, up to 4,000 anytime without a permit. My only desire for that is for concerts. And I don't have a desire to bypass the fire department for those concerts. He has the right to shut them down. I don't have events that need 4,000 people that aren't a concert. And so it's written wrong but the reason it's written that way is Chris Harrell said, just give us a number and then we'll prove it out to that number.
It's to your benefit to put the top number in.
Except if it takes forever, that it puts you out of business in the process, then it doesn't benefit you. You see my point?
Okay.
So another thing, I don't remember who it said, well, they have a fire station there at Alta. Was that you? Every single concert we have a fire truck, a brush truck. Do we not? Yeah. I also have a snowmaking system with 500,000 gallons of water and snow guns around the perimeter that we can turn on just like that. So there's a lot of things being done. But I don't need a permit that's up to 4,000 every day of the week. There's absolutely zero.
Yeah, so I think though now, the reason you have the fire trucks up there is because it's a special event, and so that puts the county on notice, and so
Correct.
that they bring the people here, and the concern is, if it's any time you want going forward, are they gonna be notified and brought
Right.
in and that sort of thing? So you can see why they have the concern. So is back to my question, is
Yes,
90 days is enough?
And I don't even know if I'm gonna ask for the concerts at that point, because I'm so fed up with it. But I'd like to meet with Rod and come up with a plan that he likes before I submit it and then get, turned down just at the altar when I don't have time to really go meet and work through it.
Okay.
So, but I would be
You
very
can
grateful
ask for
that.
more than 90 if you want.
Let's go to 120. I got a lot to do.
Let's do 180.
Okay, 180 to do
You
it.
won't need it till then anyway.
Yeah, hopefully.
But the question is, would you feel, and I don't even know if this may not be possible. Now, I want to, Angie's holding her temper.
No, go
It's
for
time to quit.
This is your
Well,
time
they
to
do need,
request
it is
it.
time to quit, they need to make
Could
a
we
motion
do
to
something
extend it.
interim where I could, for the winter season, maybe push the envelope up to 1,300 or something, as long as we have, the 24-foot access through the center, because we have permission from Richmond City to bus people on busier days from the city offices, which does not impact the parking. But I don't want to get to where, oh boy, do I have 1,000 or do I have 1,100 people? Do you see my point?
If we give you 180 days, you can come back next week. So
And
yeah.
work on that part of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, you can do it earlier. You don't have to wait 180
Okay.
days.
I'll be
And
very
we wouldn't
happy
want
with
you
that.
to, but the point is to make it 180 days so that you don't have to keep coming back to make it longer or something like that, so. Let's extend our meeting first. Commissioners.
How much time do we need for your last item?
Am I done?
I would say last item might be 15 minutes.
So half hour? Is that? Angie wants less than.
Depends on how much you'd like to
Well, no,
discuss.
I think 15 minutes will equate to 30 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we extend our meeting up to a maximum of 8:30.
And for that.
Okay. We got a motion and a second to extend the meeting to 8:30. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So, go ahead, Dirk.
Quick comment, just to finalize that, just to be completely transparent, there are a number of other issues with the Cherry Peak CUP that I'm confident John and I and the staff can work through. But just, the fire isn't the only thing, right? And I think we're all gonna work together to get you the information you need and to help you make the decision you need to make.
Thank you. How do you feel about?
On the revisions of the CUP, would there be any conditions where he had the permit before, where he could write in the conditions where he could do a maximum of 4 to 5 events a year with approval and with a written plan for those 5 events as part of his CUP?
I don't know why not.
Could I commit something from our department? I really wanna look at the code, because I don't believe, there are some in our staff that feel that the code applies the way that it, like the comment in the CUP analysis, which I'm not saying I disagree with, maybe. Angie's getting used to that from me. But the fact that the CUP actually is for up to 1,000, but I just wanna look to make sure that the code really doesn't preclude them from having special events approved. And so, we're gonna look at that and make sure that we're doing the right thing.
We were certainly grandfathered when we opened the business.
You're a grandfather, we know.
But even if the code didn't specify and says no, could he write it into his conditional use, into his revised conditional use permit, where he would like to apply on a permissible basis?
Conditions maybe.
I think,
Or would that?
my personal opinion is you can write in whatever you want.
And then if we approve it.
But once you write it in, you
Yeah.
gotta stick to it.
Right,
If
exactly.
you wanna change it, you gotta come back before us. The law may be changed.
So if he were to write in a plan where, okay, we wanna have 4 times a year, we wanna have 4,000 based with the approval of the local, the fire.
I wouldn't even put a number, just
Yeah.
the special events during the year that are gonna be a concert or whatever he does.
Yeah.
I mean, you write that in that way.
Obviously, for the business owner, it would be nice just to have a blanket sort of deal and you didn't have to be held to exactly a number or something.
You just an approval for that event.
Mr. Chairman, I might be wrong, but at this point, if the issue is at hand is all we're gonna do is extend this for another 180 days, we can let staff and Mr. Chadwick work through a lot of these details, and let's just approve, right? Or do we wanna detail more?
No, yeah, we're gonna have to have the correct conditions in place.
That says today, I don't think we could have.
I mean, all I'm suggesting is
Let's go to the next item.
we can keep talking, but are we really being productive or effective? Let's just extend it and let them guys work through it.
Yes, but
I would like to make one short statement just on the general safety risk that we see there, just so it's clear my feeling as a commissioner here on this issue, and also as being somebody who's managed risk for large events in similar type venues. And this is something that is a major concern for me, as a risk manager, as an insurer, as, all the hats I've worn over the years in doing this for, the largest event that we've hosted in the state of Utah. This is a major concern. So I support the idea of continuing this and working out the details, but the things that the chief has highlighted here are real concerns, that I really think need to be addressed in a very substantive way. I think this is a serious matter that potentially has a mass casualty impact if it's not handled correctly. So that's just a statement I want to make. I think this is a serious issue that needs to be dealt with in the right way.
Can I say one last thing? Is that okay? The problem is handling it correctly changes from week to week with government. And so it makes it very difficult for us to know what to do when it's always a moving target. And driving from Logan to Smithfield is a hazard. Much more of a hazard than a concert is at Cherry Peak Resort. That's my comment.
And I'll agree with that. Whatever it is that we do, not just this, whatever it is we do, we need to have a clearly charted course. So whatever it is we approve, particularly on conditional use permits, it's clear for the applicant, it's clear for the county, so we really know where we stand. And I think we've made a strong effort to do that in the past. And I think that's the direction we should go on this. So that's my statement.
Anything else? Okay. Someone want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, we continue it up for up to 180 days.
Second.
Okay, motion and second to continue the Cherry Peak Ski Area CUP Fourth Amendment up to 180 days. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Commissioners.
Right. Continuation of the urban rural assessment cost of services plan element. And what I'd like to do is just briefly mention that this focuses on 3 scenarios compared to existing condition. And the scenarios explore different growth patterns, for not just county unincorporated area, but the municipalities in a hypothetical sort of way that could be useful for comparing and future growth decisions and exploring how growth might be coordinated between cities and county, and potentially useful as a regional collaboration perspective and discussion point. This is not a binding policy document, it's more just study, assessment, and analysis. You may recall that the 3 scenarios compared to an existing condition explore an expansive growth pattern, which is equivalent of a past growth pattern or past growth densities. And then in scenario 2 is kind of a cluster development pattern, and 3 is a transfer pattern. And those are summarized here in this graph form. What I'd like to do is just highlight some of the comments that you shared last meeting and how those have been addressed here in the report. But you're looking at a graph of the scenarios by acres. You see the more expansive pattern of the first scenario, larger single-family lots resulting in larger acreage of single-family residential and more development, i.e. more infrastructure. A clustered pattern preserves more land acreage as a component of rural, different type of rural growth strategy, and thus a smaller footprint of actual single-family development. Therefore, a reduction in infrastructure, reduction in irrigated water use, and then more of a transfer pattern. This starts to explore moving development to more pockets of either clustering or transferred little urban pockets of growth, or communities expanding in a more urban sort of way to allow for preservation or reservation of land. You see this reserved area is land that is not necessarily preserved, not necessarily developed, but becomes future developable land. It was requested that we make clear that each scenario houses the same number of residential units, accommodates the same level of growth. So that's the little update that you see there with the total housing units line. And this is just a close-in view of the different patterns shown in terms of their pattern of growth. And what I'd like to do is just jump to where we had a good discussion last meeting, and there were some, what I've characterized as, labeled as key considerations in a section 3. There was a need to emphasize that future housing market study could be done in the future, such that future growth scenarios could be outlined or summarized based on actual projected need. This could be related to the jobs, the projected employment and the jobs and the salaries of those jobs, and that type of analysis could shed further light on what type of actual housing is in need, and the housing price points and types, and the densities, and then what that looks like in a scenario. There was discussion of how this might inform future impact fee studies, whether that's looking between jurisdictions or the county working with jurisdictions to see when and if certain type of impact fees might make sense. And then there was quite a discussion about density bonus considerations that the general plan, as well as this assessment, looks at the idea of, rather than a rezone to say an A10 to an RU5 or an RU2, that there be instead a density bonus to incentivize clustering or transferring that growth and preserving open space, whether it be ag land or sensitive lands, and that be the approach for the county to increase density and achieve that balance between growth and development. And so these are some of the points that were discussed, that the value or the productivity, the quality of that farmland, whether it's irrigated or marginally productive ground, is a consideration. And then sometimes in point B, agricultural lands also provide for other benefits, open space benefits, whether it be floodplains, riparian corridors, habitat areas. There could be a density bonus for providing an easement where there might be a future regional trail, and to encourage that trail to work its way through development and preservation could be worth a density bonus. It was brought up that the existing county agricultural land evaluation and site assessment model is a great tool, and that could be explored as a tool to consider for evaluating the amount of a density or application of a density bonus. And then that was brought up as to possibly explore when and where commercial retail services might be beneficial as an amenity in development. It was also suggested that there should be careful consideration of where development is clustered and transferred to, that there be sufficient water, and that study of water would be an important consideration in any development proposal. Acknowledging that some areas have more abundant and higher quality water supply than other areas, and that understanding the adequacy and availability of services such as fire, EMS, and others should be demonstrated, and include road access. On the topic of agriculture, I found some additional statistics, and I heard some discussion from the council that I thought would complement the discussion you had as the commission, and that is the long-term agricultural uses. In fact, I believe it was Commissioner Bowes that mentioned we're going to be seed farming in the county for a long time. And even in the face of rapid growth, there's still a lot of land in agriculture. And in the next 20 plus years, there'll still be a lot of vacant or agricultural ground. And it was interesting to explore some of the statistics that you see in point 6 and 7, that Utah is very much a import state when it comes to fruits and vegetables. But with growing population, the demand for those products increases, and therefore Utah State's documenting that as they look at the USDA, what was that called? The USDA agricultural census, that Utah is losing the total number of farms. Let me make sure I'm getting that right. The acreage is dropping, but increasing number of farms, therefore smaller average farm size. But there seems to be a link between the type of products that are growing in demand as the population increases and viable farm size. So that could be the case in Cache County in the future. That
I think it'd be really interesting, I know it's not possible, But if we could do a real-time analysis today, I'd be real interested to compare, just in that 5 years, how much land we've lost, ag land, to development. I think it'd surprise all of us.
Indeed, and I think these, recording these thoughts and this type of assessment to encourage as a reference for future collaboration could invite those types of follow-up studies. And maybe that's one that could be added, Brady.
This economy, though, could bring it to a slow for a time, but what we've seen over this last 5 years, I think would blow our minds, how much ag land has been lost to development.
And then what if we grow in patterns that don't consume as much to accommodate the equivalent number of housing units and businesses? And what if land is preserved simultaneously? So these are an in-depth look at how those tools could work and to further explore their potential implementation. So I could pause there. I would like to touch on the appendices, but just wonder if you'd like to first comment on what's been added.
Seems like you addressed the comments that were made.
Have you explored the density bonus? I mean, we talk about a density bonus. Do you have a vision of what that might look like? I mean, is that a 10% bonus that or a certain, you get one extra lot, or based on the acreage, there's a bonus around that, or we look at some of the lands, wetlands or things like that, and give them credit for those, or I don't know what you've thought about.
To the point of exploring when we did the joint workshop meeting, and we looked together at these different development scenarios, they were based on actual density bonus assumptions. Say, if there's a density bonus of this much, then here's what the cluster or transfer development pattern looks like, and the amount of land preserved and housing developed. Following that very focused workshop meeting, we backed away a little bit from getting too specific in the general plan, but I think that exercise helped to build some base level understanding of what those density bonuses, where they could start to be explored, and I think there are definitely some on council that might not want to see too aggressive of the density bonus, but all of that could be explored, and then it might depend on how cities want to engage through a potential interlocal type of approach. So I think we have some understanding based on those exercises and discussions, but intentionally backed away from getting too specific at a high plan level. Okay. So what I'd like to do now is just to mention that this is the multiple tables that you see in that assessment are derived from this larger table, and I think this could be just wouldn't hurt to keep this in the report as kind of the direct model outputs that are then detailed in the report with narrative. I'd like to just orient through Appendix A, and this is Borax Engineers. Science Bank is primarily reflected in the modeling in Appendix B. But there are a couple of changes that I noted from when they delivered this on Monday. I shared it with you, and have just a couple of modifications and refinements to this. But they're in broader terms describing the methodology and the consideration and analysis of existing growth and past growth. And Brady, we did get the correction to sewer systems.
That's awesome. I saw that. Thank you.
I appreciate you pointing that out. And water use, that there's a look at past water demand and the target of some potential reductions through conservation measures, and just as water becomes more scarce, it tends to become more valuable, and it may cost more, and people tend to be more careful when they're more accountable to the water use and the cost of water. So this is generally just setting the premises for how roadways were considered and levels of service. And but when it comes to this fire, EMS, and law enforcement, that analysis was done in documented in this appendix, but I just wanted to note that these highlighted sections here should be struck, and PDF did not provide for a strike through, so they're underlined, but the increase in travel time changes was not part of this analysis for both fire EMS and law enforcement sheriff. That would require a whole other level of consulting work and time and effort, and that just was not conducted, so that would not be accurate to keep in. And then there was a listing of growth scenarios that was not consistent with what was in the, I just presented in the assessment, the primary document assessment. So I deleted those because they're not useful or helpful, and neither consistent with the primary document, but I did want to just keep this text. It just basically acknowledges the scenario assessment, and then state that the scope of work described a baseline scenario 1, which has been renamed or titled for expansive growth.
You say we don't have this update then? This was updated since Monday?
Correct. So I could show you, your document would show more text here, but it's the same page.
Well, I was mainly interested too in your fire, or your delayed response for what, but it's fine.
Okay.
I was just trying to find out, but we're good with what you have.
And so the pages are the same. So if you wanted to see page 2, you would see this text not highlighted. But then when you get to the bottom of page 2 and page 3, you note that there's some blank space, and that's because the scenario language has been deleted or consolidated to just these 2 paragraphs of a general description and reference back to the assessment. And so then scenario 2 in the scope was, prior to the process, suggested a scenario of growth mostly occurring in rural areas, and that's been retitled as cluster development, scenario 2. Scenario 3 was scoped as a growth mostly occurring in urban areas, and that's been retitled as transfer development. Again, that ideally it's in a more compact urban form, but shapes growth and thereby helps preserve the rural area. So with the additional study and understanding of what vision general plan provides, these were retitled. And then the primary focus here is Parks Engineering did quite an extensive study looking at existing growth patterns in the past and calling that a baseline analysis. This title change here. That's where they looked at historic growth. And so Brady, I think this gets to some of what you were talking about, is just seeing what types of land uses have occurred since 2010 and where. Those could be summarized in terms of acres, but at least provides that perspective of where's the growth demand, or where was it since 2010, as a helpful reference. And residential dwellings developed since 2010. Commercial institutional development since 2010. So it provides a perspective of where we've been and how it looks moving forward. And they found that the projected numbers that we derived from the Nancy Gardner Institute look consistent with where we've come from and where we could be heading.
Can you clarify one more time on the map? Is the green belt then, is that showing green belt that was lost to development?
That's new green belt.
Green belt that was added?
And or existing green belt.
Because there should be a lot more than that.
Yeah, but it's reflecting change, I think, is what they're showing, but that didn't make sense in my mind either.
Oh, well, okay, carry on.
I think that could be clarified, just if you'd like that more clear moving forward.
Yeah, makes sense. I think if Brady has that question, others will have that question too.
Indeed. Yes, and so here is, so they're just saying they find that population projections from where we've been are reflected in this chart.
Time check, Tim, we just have a few more minutes.
Okay. And look at population growth and water demand. So this is just kind of ground truthing say, hey, we understand where we come from, where we're at, and it was a good basis for moving forward. So that's probably the time I should take. Any specific questions? They're talking about methodology, and roads differ depending on where growth occurs in the county. Different profile in the county incorporated compared to Logan or Hiram, for example. Urban versus rural.
2010, they added 1136 dwellings.
And then here's their summaries of maintaining fire, EMS, and law enforcement service levels that these would be projected based on population. I will conclude at that point. See if you'd like to take action.
Interesting information.
Recommendation, or where you'd like to go with this.
Just one other, oh, sorry.
Well, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, just one other follow-up on chart, on table 3 on populations. Of course, I'm gonna look at my home area there. We show Benson as having a negative 34 population growth. I just wonder about those numbers, based on water connections. That seems, I mean, number one, the number is very different than the census data shows. Anyway, I wonder where that comes from. I mean, just living in the community, I don't see where we've lost population, where we've
Added new
a significant number of homes there, and so that just looks a little suspect in the data.
Yeah, and it's not just Benson, it's other rural areas that seems that maybe decreasing household size.
278.
Lisbon lost 10% of their population.
Doesn't necessarily drop the number of homes, but decreases the household size, therefore potential loss in population. But then just the data capture each and every home.
But Lewiston, I mean, that's a better than 10% drop in population. That seems a bit suspect.
You have to ground truth it and
Yeah.
track it moving forward.
My thoughts, commissioners, are that I don't think we are in a good position to take action on this tonight. And so, yeah, I wouldn't mind a little more time to finish going through this. But more importantly, I'd love to see all of our commissioners, or at least the ones that aren't here, have a chance to chime in as well.
Okay.
And so if that doesn't cause major problems for you, Tim, and staff, I'm thinking we'll probably not take action on this tonight. Is that?
I would agree.
Support
you
the
guys
chairman.
agree with that? Okay. Okay, so anything else then? Okay, we'll make sure Melinda and others have a chance, Lane, to digest this information as well, and hopefully be at our next meeting and chime in accordingly, so. Okay, anything else, Angie?
Nope. Next month, we just have a couple of subdivisions, a rezone, and a request for ordinance amendments for the definition of developable acreage.
Okay. Any final thoughts, questions for staff, anything, commissioners? Okay, if not, we'll stand